Most public service employees rely on the brilliance of GEMS. The popular Tanzanite One option takes the blues out of medical expenses, paying up to 100% of members' monthly contributions. The green gleam of emerald value is in all the rich benefits of the traditional emerald option, but at a lower premium. Both provide the best in coordinated care, essential in a COVID-19 world. Nominate your own general practitioner so that you have a family trusted professional by your side. Benefit from specialist referrals for specific conditions. And for surgical or more intensive treatment, choose from the top-notch hospitals in the GEMS network. SMS JOIN to 33165 to bask in the brilliance of GEMS, or call 0860 004 367. Visit www.gems.gov.za. Connect on Facebook or follow our Twitter feed for crystal clear GEMS news. Conditions and benefits are subject to GEMS scheme rules.
A big welcome to all of you who've tuned into this webinar today, an important conversation that we're set to have. You know, it's not often that we actually place health and wellness at the center of our conversations, and yet we know it's such a big part of who we are, and it can take so much from us. As people were going through probably what has been one of the toughest periods, we've had over 2 years of a pandemic, the associated losses, depression, and overall change in life that has come as a result of that. And these are conversations that, while are very personal to us, we experience and we feel them in the home. They're different. They're difficult to translate in the workplace. How do we begin to have a conversation about people's health and wellness, even in as far as it relates to their work? And it's part of the reason why this collaboration between the Mail and Guardian and GEMS has come at such an important moment. And so thank you to our sponsors and everybody that has come on board to make this conversation possible. Just a quick idea of how the day is going to run. We're going to be hearing from our speakers by way of just a panel discussion. And as always, you as the delegates that are part of this conversation will have the opportunity to ask questions to our delegates. Please, nothing is off the table, especially if it's going to help you understand things a little bit better. What are the things and approaches that you can be taking when approaching your workplace and helping you understand what are your rights in as far as it pertains to your wealth, to your health rather, and your wealth, of course, because health is wealth. Yes. So rediscovering you, that's our conversation. Health and wellness in a post-pandemic world. Our guest today, let me introduce Dr. Vuyo Ola, who is a Chief Health Officer with GEMS, Dr. Stan Mulwabi, who is the Principal Officer at GEMS, and Ms. Pride Mkwanazi, who is a mental health specialist. Now, throughout our conversation, we're going to be running polls that will be posted on the webinar. So just look out for the polls. Please answer the questions, and towards the end, we will be telling you the results of the various polls that we are running. And of course, I will also tell you what the questions we're asking you are. Then on that note, let's get started. Health and wellness, like I said, can be a very personal conversation. And yet we know it is a conversation that also has an impact on the economy, not just of individual companies, but economies of countries. It contributes overall to GDP. So Dr. Vuyo, let me then begin with you and ask the cost of wealth, good well-being, right? Because obviously if you are well, nothing is wrong with you, then there's not much for us to talk about. But what is the cost of ill health for employers and employees?
So, good health and wellness is one of the sustainable developmental goals, SDG number 3. So it just shows how much of a priority it is globally. If you look at how absenteeism due to ill health, whether it's physical health or mental health, costs the employer. There's a lot of absenteeism. Even those that are present in the workplace, you find them disengaged and not productive in the workplace. They tend to socially isolate themselves. So it's very important. It's something that both the employer and the employee need to take seriously. If you look from a mental wellness perspective, depression and anxiety are one of the top reasons for mental illness, especially in the working environment. And this really leads to a lot of obviously, an atmosphere that will not only affect the employee, but will also affect the other the employer, as well as the employees, of course, that they're around. It leads to, just as I mentioned before, disengagement, not being as productive, just, affecting, or bringing, I don't want to use the word negative environment, but, not socially interacting with colleagues as you normally do. Then on the other side, you've got physical illness like, the non-communicable diseases like hypertension, diabetes, heart disease. These are considered to cost the employer up to billions of rands per annum. So it's very important for employers to really take care of their employees and make sure that the workplace is a productive workplace. But on the other hand, as employees as well, we need to be aware of each other. When our colleague is not okay, go over and have a talk with your colleague, make them included so that they feel like they have somebody to talk to. And you'd be amazed at how much, when you start sharing with your colleagues at work, how much actually you have in common. And really it provides, that feeling that you're not alone. We're all suffering from these anxieties and tensions, and so I think it's important to have those conversations, both on the employer and the employee side.
Dr. Stan, while, we're all going through similar issues, it can be hard to break that line, because once you enter into a workplace, there is an invisible barrier, there's an invisible boundary that almost suggests that these are the things that you should leave at home, or once you get out of your transporter, once you've stepped into the work environment, these are the issues that now are off bounds. How do we begin to have those conversations without necessarily being seen to be crossing that boundary? And I'm not actually sure what that boundary says. I just know that it exists, and we're all aware of it.
Yeah. So if you look at the definition of being healthy, part of the answer lies in that when I think it's WHO which defines it, healthy as a state of both physical and mental well-being, right? Now, if you are physically ill, we tend to see, it's almost overt that we can see this person has got a physical illness, they're not doing okay. You'll even get sympathy, where a person will basically say, well, you're not looking well today, are you fluish? It's a physical, and people then, that they express that sympathy in the workplace because it is overt. The problem usually comes with the mental side of things, where we talk about the boundaries, where sometimes it's a matter of people not wanting to reveal that they actually have a mental problem, because sometimes, depending on what type of mental problem it is, there could be issues of stigma as well attached to it. But now we know that nowadays the biggest problem that we are having is the problem of issues of depression, the bipolar type of disorders, which have become a very big issue in terms of people being able to perform their work at work. So that issue of the boundary is probably defined by what is it that you're suffering from.
Vuyo, I want to bring you in there, or rather, Pride, let me bring you in there, because this question of the stigma is such a big one, and it's what forces people into silence. And often illness in the space of the workplace can be linked to efficiency, that I don't want people to know I'm not okay, because I don't want them to look at my work and judge it from the state of my health, which is something that happens quite often. And people are trying to not be judged on anything else other than what they bring into the table.
I think it's such an important thing to actually have these conversations around stigma. around, what is really happening in the workplace. What kind of cultures are we fostering or we having in the workspace? Because the truth of the matter is we all have a mental health. Your boss has a mental health, your child has a mental health, your husband has a mental health. We all have it, and it's very important for us to actually understand how to take care of it so that it doesn't become an illness. So your well-being is very, very important. And I know that a lot of people do feel like, it's hard for them to communicate with their managers or their leaders and tell them that, hey, I'm suffering from a mental health issue or a mental health problem. We always hit it on the top level. It's this anxiety, this depression. But the truth of the matter is it's really, really a deep need for us to actually be having these conversations, and for managers and leaders to take up, training and awareness on how to actually help individuals in their workspace if they're suffering from mental health, for us to be able to even identify some of the things, what are the triggers, know your employees very well and understand them. This person today is not feeling well. Maybe there's something else that's happening. They're not coping, so we need to foster that culture a bit more to bring that awareness in.
Dr. Veer, I can hear the manager saying that at the end of the day, I'm a manager. I've got targets to meet. I've got work to get done. So when we look at especially issues around mental illness in a post-COVID world, it was interesting because while we were still under those hard lockdowns, one of the things that was said often is that we're battling COVID, but there is this depression and anxiety that has come about as a result of COVID. So when you look at what is more prevalent when it comes to the mental illness spectrum in the country, what are some of the things we're dealing with there?
So, we have this saying that I don't think we were ever ready for COVID.
Yeah.
It just came, it hit us, and we had to adapt very quickly, right? We went into lockdown. We were all just in our respective houses. And one of the unintended consequences of that is the fact that people were feeling isolated. People had concerns about their finances, concerns about the economy and the impact that they would have. Some people didn't even know if they went back to work, they would have jobs. In the midst of all of this, we were losing loved ones, right? And taking care of our loved ones. And on top of that, the kids were at home as well. So not only are you expected to put in a full day's work, you're also taking care of sick loved ones. You also have to make sure that the kids attend virtual school. So, and on top of that, we're stuck in the house. That sense of community is not there. You're unable to engage, and socialize with your friends and extended family. So that sense of community was really lost. And on top of that, you still have to put in a full day's work. And there's this barrier that virtual meetings create, right? Because we all thrive on human interaction, right? We love being, the water cooler conversations and things like that. So, while mental health has always been an issue in the workplace and globally, I think it just exacerbated the mental health issues that we've always had. So I'll go back to what you said about the manager. Manager thinks, I have targets and I have, deliverables. But if your employees are not okay, you're not going to reach those targets. So then it's important to really take stock of what's going on in the environment, right? And we tend to compartmentalize as human beings. So Dr. Stan said earlier, physical illness is very clear. When somebody is not well. But a lot of people that are mentally ill can compartmentalize and they act like they're okay. I saw this clip on Facebook that was really disturbing about this lady that was in a party, holding a glass of wine, dancing nicely to the music, smiling and having a good time. And the caption says, this was the night before she took her own life due to depression. So what you'll see is not always what the person is going through. So the employer really needs to be aware of what's going on with their employees. Take stock of what's going on. Find out how your employees are doing and make sure you put, initiatives and programs in place that will help them deal with whatever it is, because it could be workplace related. But remember, the problems from home, we also bring them to the workplace. GBV, gender-based violence is a huge issue in our country. A lot of people are suffering from that. They might directly or indirectly be impacted. So there's a whole lot of things that are happening in the workplace and outside of the workplace that will impact our productivity in the workplace.
Stan, I want to come to you and stay with a similar line of question and just digging a little bit deeper into this mental illness. And again, what we are seeing as more prevalent when it comes to the spectrum of diseases that fall under mental illness in the country.
Yeah. So largely, and I think Dr. Vuyo mentioned it, it would be a mood type of disorders. It's largely what would affect people in the workplace. Earlier on when we spoke about stigma would have been largely associated with a psychotic type of illness. So people, in general terms would be said, you lose your mind. And the stigma arose from there. And now it ended up painting the whole mental illness spectrum. But in the workplace, largely, you would find that it is unlikely that you'll have the psychotic types of illnesses, because those will be treated by the treating either psychiatrist or the entire team, and those people would really be away from work. It is the mood disorders that tend to affect, and it can be either the depression itself, it could be anxiety itself. Maybe sometimes people get, on the other side of the excitable type of mood disorders. So in essence, to your question, that would be the spectrum. And now, because maybe the non-recognition of this mood, and what by non-recognition is, I'm referring to what Dr. Vuyo was saying, to that the employer has to make means that we recognize that these exist, so that there are programs in the workplace to assist the employees so that the targets are met. The very same thing. Otherwise, if you are in that state, you can't be fully productive. And I think that's the main thing.
I'm thinking about the way in which we take certain behaviors, even in a workplace, and we don't probe a bit further. It might be because of the high pressure environments that work can be, but Mang will be known to be temperamental. Oh, that this person is moody. No, this one is like that. And we often just ascribe it to the characteristics of an individual and don't see the pattern of behavior and say, what if there's something more behind this? So are there particular red flags that I think all of us can be aware of? And I'm cautious here because we don't want to create a situation where Kathy shouted at Stan and now suddenly it says, you get an email saying, we think that, we need to have an intervention in this regard.
Can I follow up on just what you have said?
Yeah.
We're talking about mental health, and I suppose we are saying illness in the workplace. But the workplace is a place for working.
Yeah.
Now, but there's that element when we talk about employees, we talk about management earlier on. The whole thing of when you come to work, you meet employees and then you greet and then you say, how are you? Right? They say, I'm okay. And it ends there. And it's almost like routine. That how are you question could actually go further than seeing exactly what you're talking about, the actual person who's not okay. If we were not just doing it in a routine manner, you come in and you say, how are you today? We meet in the lift, you say, I'm okay. The person is looking the other side. And that's it, because they've said, I'm okay. It could well be that observing that would actually show that, this one is not well today. Is there something we can do, to follow up on that very answer and the way they behaved, even if they said, I'm okay.
Pride, the intervention doesn't always have to come from the outside, right? There's a responsibility that we as individuals have to try and understand what's really going on with us, right? And that's often the tough bit, being able to sit with oneself and acknowledge that I am not okay, just to myself, before I'm even able to voice it to other people?
You know, I think it's a very tough thing to actually do the deep work, the inner work of really, like you're saying, to understand yourself. Where are you? You know, I often talk about different minds that you have. You know, you have different voices all the time, because as an individual, you're a mom, you're a wife, you are a leader,
Yes.
you know, you're an employee, you're an employer. And oftentimes the spectrum of that, what happens is that there's different voices of yourself that constantly are speaking to you, you know, and you need to be able to have time to listen in on those. You know, a lot of people sabotage themselves because these minds then step into environments that they shouldn't be stepping into. So if you're in the workspace, you know, you're feeling the pressure, the burden of your home life, you know, and that voice is constantly speaking to you. If you're in the home space, you're feeling the burden, the pressure of your work life, you know, and also the culture of the environment that you come from also adds that burden and that pressure. So you find people jittery, you find people anxious because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow when I get to work because of the environment that I come in. So it's also very hard for us to sometimes look at it because it seems like a norm, you know, I come from a high pressured environment. This industry is pressured, you know, but the truth of the matter is, have you taken the time to sit back and actually say to yourself, in this high pressure environment that I come from, who am I? How do I operate? What are my strengths in this environment so that I can actually thrive? You know, because the truth of the matter is, when you don't understand those things about yourself or understand that, you are then not able to perform the way that you need to, and what your employer needs from you, you're not able to deliver. So we need to be able to silence those voices, you know, the sabotaging voices, to get to that sage stage where you are able to then almost guide your life and guide yourself in a meaningful manner. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, you know, that people need to get to, whether it's coaching, psychology, you know, seeing a therapist, actually speaking about some of these traumas that we've gone through, because they are important to talk about so that we can perform better.
Well, let's talk about the practical steps now that employers can put in place to show that they are taking mental wellness and overall health of their employees seriously. And what I'm talking about now is going just beyond the email.
Yeah.
You know, that
Of
email
course.
that we're concerned about your
Yes.
your well-being.
Yes.
Please take care of yourself. That probably half of the company doesn't even bother to read.
Yes.
How do they do that? Again, probably being mindful of the fact that many of these managers, executives, don't necessarily want to open, you know, therapy offices
Yes.
in their office, but they certainly may want to create that environment.
Yeah. So I'm so glad you asked that, because I actually wanted to follow up on. So there's two aspects to it. What can the employer do? You know, a lot of organizations will spend money on various programs and initiatives, but nobody ever actually goes back to say, are they really working? Do they speak to the needs of our employees? So I think I mentioned the word taking stock before. Ask your employees as the employer, what are the things that are causing stress or ill health or ill mental health in the or bother you in the workplace? And you can do that, for example, with anonymous surveys, with focus groups, but it has to be with your peers, because we know that we are more comfortable talking around our peers. If my boss is sitting there, am I really going to be able to say what I want to say? So understand. So before you implement anything, understand what your employees are going through. Then once you understand that, then put initiatives and programs in place to make sure that you address those. But what's also important is that go back to see, are these interventions actually working or not? Because there's no point in continuing, and like you say, the email, or every time you'll say, oh well, but there's a counselor available to talk. Go talk to the counselor. Just find out if this is actually working. Is it really bringing the desired outcome that we want? But the one thing I really want to touch on that we forget as employers, right? Because we are employees, but we're also employers in leadership positions, is I like the word psychological safety. So is the environment that the employee is working under psychologically safe? Meaning, am I being bullied at work? Am I being intimidated if I ask questions or I'm vocal in a meeting? Is there a place to foster robust discussions? There's such a thing as healthy conflict. Is the conflict that is the healthy, not people arguing, but people having robust discussions and coming up with innovative ways of taking the business forward. So if employees are always scared to speak up, if employees always are afraid of being victimized or intimidated, then of course that will affect their mental health eventually. So we need to look at all those things and make sure that, and culture in organization, I think we all know the phrase culture eats strategy for breakfast, and now it's breakfast, lunch. It's strategy for breakfast, lunch, and supper. So we need to be aware of the culture that we foster, because that has a huge impact on the employees' mental health.
So what you're saying then is that for organizations to show that they're taking issues of health and wellness seriously, it has to come as part of the culture in an organization. There's no superficial way of addressing the problem if you genuinely want to be able to deal with it. And yet we know that often that's in some companies, that's what they don't want to do, right? We want to bring you for a wellness day. But if you do have a focus group and we say, what's the problem? Well, my boss is a bully. My boss is the problem. I work in a toxic environment. And companies then don't really want to touch the elephant in the room. How do we move then from that base? And again, I'm thinking of employees here who are not in a position necessarily to go find other jobs because where are they in this economic climate? They need to keep showing up and need to keep surviving, regardless of what some of those strenuous circumstances might be.
So I don't know, you wanted to follow up, or I can take
Yes, no, you can take it.
So the work environment, I mean, as Dr. Boyes indicated, it can be a very dicey environment. In that you've mentioned bullying, right? Toxic environments. Now, these environments, they arise because of relationship issues and pressures that people find themselves facing. And then there are those, they could be issues of hierarchy, but it boils down to the culture of the organization. Now, I always like, there's a grid by one of the, I think the HR people, Blanchard, who talks about a manager can either have concern for production or concern for the people. And it's the balance between the concern for production and concern for the people, which will define the culture of the organization. So if we are just thinking about production, sales, we must reach our targets, you tend to forget about the people element. And striking a balance between the two, it is really the critical thing that will deal with issues of the culture that can be said to be toxic, because a manager who's thinking production doesn't care how you woke up, you left a sick child at home, you left a husband who's just lost their work, the past month, it was the last month. You come with all those to work, and all we want, if we are producing widgets in the environment, that's all we want. 5,000 widgets by the end of the day. How you produce them, we don't even ask that very same question of how are you, which could give an employee an opportunity to say, my husband lost their job yesterday, but I'm okay. I know I need to. Then you can start being empathetic towards them. And I think that's really where things can go wrong in an organization.
Pride, a lot of it also has to do with our ability as individuals to be able to take control of our lives, especially over the aspects of our lives that we do have control over. So, what advice would you have for people who are in these toxic work environments, who are having to face these cultures that are structural and are not necessarily in their hands to change, but they do want to feel that there's something they can do that can make their lives easier?
I think that's such a tough question, because how do you maneuver yourself out when you need the job, like you said earlier on? How do you then build yourself up or develop yourself in that environment, because you need it for now and there's nothing you can do out of it? And it's very hard, because we need more people-centric leaders. I like what you're saying, Dr. Stan, about striking the balance, more people-centric leaders that can actually be able to navigate and assist people in this current time, and people also need to learn how to balance themselves out. How do I do that? How do I start balancing myself out? Go for counseling. In that moment, you can actually figure out how to maneuver through this hard work environment that you're in, because you might need it, because financially, this is the only place where you financially can balance yourself out. But maybe from an external perspective, you can start drawing some strength from that perspective. Maybe getting a coach that can actually assist you, a life coach. Maybe it's a matter of you wanting to step up a level as well, and you're not able to do it in this environment that you're in. Getting somebody to actually guide your life and show you where your blind spots are as well can actually also assist you, because maybe the environment that you come from is not allowing, it's not an open door policy that allows you to actually vent out, speak out, and be heard. And it's also important to know that you don't always have to rely on the internal structures in the workspace that you're in. Also go outside and see what else and who else can actually assist you, so that you can either step out of the toxic environment and financially be secured at the same time, because a lot of people then tend to leave jobs without having the next one. And that puts a lot of people, it puts a lot of people in distress. But then where do you strike the balance? Your mental health versus your financial health as well, because you also need the two. So how do you then plan with somebody an exit strategy, if it's an exit strategy that you need to be looking into for the benefit of your well-being?
These are such difficult considerations, and we know often a crossroads that we all have to face at some point or another, especially if you're unhappy with the environment that you may find yourself in. Let's talk then about some of the programs that you think employers can be deliberate about putting in place. I know we spoke more broadly about it, but specific programs that aren't too expensive, that are responsive, like you were saying, to the needs of the employees, and not really just copy pasting what we saw the guy next door doing. They had a wellness day, so we're going to have it, and then that will solve our problems.
And listen, not to knock wellness days. I love wellness days. I'm one of the people at work that will complain about when it's a wellness day happening. So wellness days are good, right? Let me just touch on something that Tess said first about, understand yourself and go outside. It doesn't always have to be an internal structures within the organization. Go ask for help, consult with your GP, tell them what's going on, because remember, there's also mental illness that needs to be treated. If it's not treated, then it just exacerbates the whole situation and all the issues that we were talking about. So it's important that people go and ask for help with the right, go to your mental health practitioner, speak to your GP, so that you can be referred to a psychiatrist if you need to be. But GPs ordinarily are able to treat mental illness. But coming back to your question, sorry, I just wanted to add on that. Coming back to your question, I think I love wellness days, but make it more meaningful, okay? And sometimes, listen, we've been in situations where you're like, oh my goodness, like, this is not the good day for you. It's not a good day for this. I have this and this and this and this on my list. I'm worried about my to-do list. Do something that will actually entice people to come.
Don't give them apples and bananas.
Don't, entice them with something, make it exciting, right? And do like the normal screening tests. But guess what? You can also have a mental health practitioner that will be sitting there and in a private room where, or some giving out pamphlets, for example. Here's my number, here's this, if you need help. It's amazing how much people are drawn to, just if somebody takes the initiative, or if you see, mental health specialists like Stay would be able to see somebody that's not okay. They showed up to the wellness day. Take advantage of that. Have these sessions with people where you make them aware of what is available. Because a lot of the times we have, our employee assistance programs that you find out the uptake is very low. So have those in place, make people aware of it. The other thing is that we always have, a national calendar. Sort of align all your activities with the national calendar to make sure that you create awareness, mental health awareness week, diabetes awareness. Remember, overall, we're talking mental wellness, but also I think physical wellness is good as well, because everything ties in together. So have those programs where and find interesting ways of people to actually participate. But it's always good to go back, get feedback. Stop doing the same thing if it doesn't help. Go back if you see that the people have not shown up. Find out why. Ask the employees, what would you like us to do? But just be more proactive in terms of making sure that employees are a part of whatever initiative you put in place. The one thing that you forget as leadership is also that we need to get involved. So if we don't get involved and we don't take initiative and participate in these programs, how do we expect that the rest of the employees will just follow? We need to also lead. I think that's a part of the let's be seen to be engaging in these things so that employees can also see how good it is. But I think interaction and getting feedback is very important to see if really what you're doing has an impact or not.
Now, so many important things have come out of our conversation so far, and we will continue with it in a moment. I just wanted to let you know, those that are joining us virtually, the poll question has officially been launched, and what we're asking you as part of our poll question is, does your employer offer the tools and support for physical and mental wellness? Will your employer offer the tools and support for physical and mental wellness? I'd really love for you to participate in that poll, and we'll announce the results that is towards the end of today's webinar. To continue here then, Stan, the sensitivities around approaching these things in the workplace. How would you suggest that people go about having these conversations, especially with their colleagues where they might have legitimate concerns about somebody's well-being, again, without being seen to be encroaching on that person's personal space, really?
No, I think so. Dr. Voya firstly mentioned the programs, like the employer assistance programs, which really tends to be what most companies will go for. So you have it in place, and it usually has a number that employees can phone. And then it stresses the confidentiality aspects. But then we come to the same problem. Do people trust it to the extent that when they have a problem, they can actually phone? So that would be one of the things that one would look at in terms of the workplace. But I think the issue of trust, it's the issue of trust between employees in general. So when you have a line manager, if you have trust, then you will be able to approach them and say, if you see me not performing well today, this is blah, blah, blah that has happened to me, but I'll give it my best. So that issue of trust in the relationships between management and employees plays a big role onto whether people will be forthcoming with the issues that they may have in the workplace. But the other thing that I think it's quite important is the issue of awareness in general. So if you can't get help in the workplace, there are organizations that as an individual, you can still phone. I'm going to take one example. SADAG is well known, South African Depression and Anxiety group, I think. So those are, and there's other organizations where you can phone confidentially, and then if they cannot assist you with your problem as an employee, And remember earlier when we were talking about internal and external programs. So there must be somewhere to at least to run to. Because this issue of confidentiality, if I reveal I've got this, are they going to victimize me? As an employee, you're not sure. But if you have trust, you know, and it depends then on different organizations, how they have dealt with these issues that will determine how employees are able to engage on these things.
Pride, do you want to build on that, the question of sensitivities?
Yeah, I think it's such an important question because so many people are scared of coming out. So many people are scared of showing their vulnerabilities because you don't know how your manager or even your colleagues will treat you. It goes back to the bullying, you know. People get bullied in the workspace. And so now you're adding an extra layer of mental health. We're having these conversations, you know, to saying these things lead to you not feeling well in the workspace, feeling depressed, not able to get out of bed because, oh my gosh, my boss is going to torment me when I get there, or my colleagues are going to laugh at me. I'm feeling ostracized. I'm not feeling okay. And maybe even your work environment is not such a bad environment, but your personal struggles are taking over. So you're not then able to cope in the work environment. Who do you run to? Who do you tell? You know, how do you actually get yourself heard in those spaces? And I think that we need to, firstly, awareness, have a lot of awareness in organization, educate people about these different things that can actually happen to them in the workspace. Because for a long time, people did not understand what was happening to them. And it was always like a silent battle. You know, it's a silent battle that I don't feel up to it. It's a silent battle that I can't do this, not because I don't want to, but I possibly need some training. And the fact that every time I'm being asked to do this task, I'm being victimized in it makes it even more burdensome on me. So we need to do a lot more education. We need leadership coaching, a lot of leadership coaching. And the leadership coaching needs to work around leaders understanding people. We can talk about all the outputs. We can talk about technology. We can talk about a lot of things. But when you don't have human capital, you're not able to actually have the output you're looking for. So leaders need to actually understand people a lot more closely so that they themselves, and we spoke about it earlier, are able to identify some of these red flags in the workspace, or are they able to and they're able to build people in the right manner, you know. And yes, we have HR in workspaces, but we actually need to build more of a robust conversation in those departments as well. You know, get external forces that can actually come in with mental strategies that can actually be adopted by these spaces so that people's minds are protected and people's mental health is taken care of, because people just need a safe net to run to be able to say, today, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
When we talk about that openness and that coming out, employers always seem to worry about people taking advantage of their ailments to not be at work or to not be productive. How much of that do we actually see? And does it outweigh the need then to have this conversation at the forefront? And I'd like to hear what some of your experiences have been. That okay, if Kathy has broken her toe, and you know she broke it 3 months ago, it's still not well, and still today I'm getting a message about how I can't come to work because my toe now something else has happened to it. And I wonder then how do employers also then navigate that space without being seen as being insensitive? I don't know who wants to go for that one first. Okay, sure.
There's a reason why I want to go for that. There's an element that let us not forget that it's not always the employer who's in the wrong.
Yes.
And that's why I wanted to go first. It is true that employees sometimes abuse this right of being sick. And when you are sick, you do have the right, you know, to be treated. I mean, these are provided for in the Labor Relations Act and all of those things. But now, the problem that we have also had to deal with in the workplace is those who abuse these arrangements to the extent then when genuine cases of a person being ill are reported, the managers are always skeptical. Is it true that they are work? So I think that is the thing that introduces that element of skepticism to the extent that now you have to prove it with a sick note, and then that takes away the sensitivity, the empathy that people may have, because it becomes now all an official interaction. If you have presented the letter, only then can I say, oh, by the way, you're really truly sick. And by that time, when it comes to showing sensitivity, you have lost that period of showing it immediately. A person reports to you that, you know what, I'm not hurt. This broken toe of mine hasn't healed. And then sensitivity comes in where, we are all in this, we're supporting you, would love you to have a speedy run. And I think that is what has complicated this whole thing as well.
I mentioned the term psychological safety before. And just to touch on or to carry on to what Dr. Stan says, it doesn't mean everybody has to be nice all the time. Even with somebody who just doesn't want to work or is being lazy or is not meeting targets, that action shouldn't be, taken. We are in the workplace. There has to be rules and regulations that are followed, right? But I think if you look at, there's a study I think that came out that says as 1 in 3 people that report that they are ill. Only out of everybody that reports or calls in sick at work, only 1 out of 3 of those are actually ill.
Oh no.
The others are. So you could think, okay, so and so. We all know the Monday people, right? So every Monday, after partying and whatever all weekend, so and so is gonna call in sick. Everybody's just not surprised. But we also know there are people who are just I think it's the term. It's called presenteeism. They're there, right? But they're not really doing anything. Those are the people that, like, just the simplest tasks, they mess up the simplest tasks. They're just so disengaged, right? Let's go back to that element of trust. And let's start with the teams. Let's not look at the organization as a whole. As a line manager, you need to understand your team. And you need to build that element of trust and safety. So don't wait for that person. You see something is going on with so-and-so. Because this is not normally how so-and-so acts, but in the last few months, they've been acting in this way. Speak to them, create that openness, that tell them, without being punitive, talk to them. I've noticed this trend. You tend to be like this. You tend to, fail at simple tasks and this and that. I can see how you engage with your colleagues. You're always on your own. You're always on your laptop. And I pass by and I see that you're on Facebook or you're scrolling the internet when you're supposed to be working. What is going on? Create that safety. Let's look at the smaller teams. Let's focus on each other as smaller teams, because I think sometimes you always do these organization-wide things. While they are good, but look at your team, understand your team, because not everybody will be able to just come forward to say, I'm not okay. So, we need to tackle both sides. There's the naughty people, and we need to deal with the naughty people. But there's usually a reason behind somebody not wanting to come to work. And Stay touched on it. If I know that if I get to work, there's such and such a meeting this morning, and I know, I'm going to be ridiculed and called names and be embarrassed in front of my colleagues, of course I'm not going to come. So there's usually something behind that avoidance behavior. And we need to just dig deeper, talk to each other. Don't wait for people to come to you. Talk to them.
All right.
Yeah. I think the naughty people that are just, not wanting to, they cost a lot of money. And those are the more difficult to fix or to deal with. But I think just overall, I think there's always something behind, even people being present or people not coming. There's always something behind. Let's dig deeper. Let's talk to our people to find out what is it that is troubling you and how can we make this a safer environment for you. And it could not even be related to work. It could be, like we said earlier, something that's happening at home. We just need to continue to have those conversations.
Fantastic.
I think openness is a key thing, being open with the people that you manage, allowing them to know that there's an open door policy. But also as a leader, what interventions do you put in place? Knowing very well that this so-and-so performs like this, And now all of a sudden, this is what's happening. So is it a matter of first base conversation, second base conversation, and then third, there's a level of consequence, so that me as an employee as well, I also understand that I'm pushing the boundaries, I'm pushing the parameters of which I'm supposed to be operating in. Because at the end of the day, I need this income, or I need this job to facilitate the life that I want. So what am I doing? What am I saying? And that is why working from home, I know there's organizations who have asked people to come back into, the work environment and spaces like that. My question is, do we really still need to have a 5-day working week for those individuals who have proved that the outputs, that they can actually have a good output while working in the home environment as well, and the level of trust is where the conversation needs to be. Can we be trusted as employees? What am I doing when I was working from home 5 days a week? Was I putting in the work that I needed to put in? And at the end of the day, I'm an adult. It's my responsibility to know what it is that I want. So I think there's a level of openness, intervention, but also us being responsible and actually taking on and saying, this is what I need, therefore I'm going to show up in the way that I need to show up.
All right. Thanks for those responses. Just a quick reminder again of the poll question we're asking. Does your employer offer the tools and support for physical and mental wellness? We're going to be closing that poll in the next couple of minutes. So if you can rush over just to the tab on your screen to vote before we actually do that. I'll also be taking your questions for our panelists. You can just drop them in the chat box. And if you have a question for a particular guest, you can mention that just before or even after you've posted your questions, but we'll be getting to those shortly. I think before, in fact, I take the questions from our delegates who are part of this webinar, I want to then zoom in on the medical aids and put you under the spot for a little bit, because obviously you have all of these thousands of members who are part of you, who are paying monthly contributions. And if anybody knows about the state of their well-being or their health, it's you, because you have to sit through all of those claims and bills and whatever else it might be. How are you, as GEMS in particular, contributing to this conversation of well-being and mental well-being in the workplace? Will?
And I see Dr. Sen is eager to answer this
No.
one.
Please start, Doctor. I'll follow after you.
Listen, I'll start with, I think we could be doing more in terms of the conversations. And I think what we tend to focus on is what benefits do we provide, right? Anybody can go on the GEMS app and see what my mental health benefits are. How many times I can go to the psychologist, how many times I can go to the GP or refer to a specialist like a psychiatrist. But you're raising a very important point. Are we having the conversations? So we have at GEMS what we call wellness days in the workplace. We ensure, we're a private insurer, but for government employees. So we engage with the various government departments and bring wellness days in the workplace. And we do have wellness conversations, not just the wellness testing and the screening. We do have the conversations, but I think we could be doing more in elevating the discussions to make sure, and also engaging with the employer, by the way, to ensure that we collaborate more in terms of bringing awareness awareness on mental health. It's so unfortunate that the stigma on mental health, and we've all mentioned it, is still there. It's easier for me to say I have hypertension or diabetes, right? But to say I suffer from depression or anxiety, you don't know how you're going to be perceived. You don't know how people are going to treat you. So I think what we need to do is have those conversations with the employer and the employees, and have, I guess, dialogues like this is what I'm saying. That's what we need to be doing more and break the stigma. Do you remember there used to be such a stigma around HIV? The stigma is not really there anymore. There's pockets here and there, but now HIV is just regarded as a chronic illness that is manageable, right? but there's still that stigma around mental health and how we treat each other when we find out about that. So I think the responsibility is on us as medical schemes, as GEMS, to say employees, let's have more of these conversations. So thank you to Male and Guardian for starting this conversation, and hopefully there will be more of these. Yes, because I think it's the dialogues that we need.
Dr. Stan,
Yeah.
when you're sitting at home and you're seeing your members fighting and angry, and you can see, hey, the depression levels are high, the morale is low, and there's just these stalemates with the employer. What role do you think you as a medical aid?
Yeah. So apart from what Dr. Voyes mentioned, which I thought she's going to mention because she's highly involved in this part I want to mention, the benefit design of medical schemes, and now specifically here talking about GEMS, with regards to mental illness, access to health, mental illness, has actually evolved quite a lot. You know, we're coming from a time where you'd run out of benefits because typically, if you have a mental illness, you'll need a lot of consultations. And those would generally run out very quickly because you utilize the same pool of consultations. And what has happened, there are now mental health programs that we have set up where there would be consideration for more consultations through various processes that we have within GEMS, you know, to extend access to mental health consultations. Usually, if we take major depression, people need to be admitted at least for a week or two, sometimes 3. And that is one where we found that there is a minimum requirement as a medical scheme that we have to cover. When that gets exhausted, there is a program within GEMS on how we extend those days for those who did not recover within the minimum that you require, which is about 21 days, which is 3 weeks. But you find that those are extended. So it is just how we respond to this problem. But why I said Dr. Voyo, I thought we'd mention this because I know there's a lot of engagements with the mental health professionals to also understand their perspective in terms of, we seem to be, you are doing this, we are funding. Can we understand what you are trying to do so that we can try and align what we are doing in terms of benefit design to meet as best as we possibly can the need of the members of GEMS. So those are some of the things that we do to try and align. It's still a very problematic area. Benefits run out because but we evolving as we go along to try and promote access to these benefits.
All right, fantastic. I'm going to go straight to the questions then that our delegates have been asking. Thank you for all of the questions. We are noting them as we go along. We still have time to pop in some extra questions if you want to, because we'll only be wrapping up in about the next 20 minutes. So we'll take questions for the rest of the session. I'll kick it off with this question from Bonita, who's asking, how do you suggest one creates a healthy working environment that enables employee well-being? And I know we've touched on it in different aspects, but maybe something that we can just review again. Who wants to go for that question? Will you go for it?
Yeah. I think that we need to, again, we've touched on it, talked about openness, you know. That is one of the key things that we need to do. But also initiatives and programs that can actually assist people in understanding themselves. And I think that's the most important thing. It's the fundamental thing. People understanding themselves and leaders understanding people in the organizations that they work in, so that we are then able to have these mental health conversations and not take each other for granted, right? That my employer knows that I am, you know, always not okay, therefore I take that for granted. No, we need to actually make sure that these initiatives are kick-started and we have people that can actually educate and give awareness in the work environment around mental ill health. A
question here from Doris or Doric Sitole says, how does one deal with an employer that is not interested in taking some responsibility to address toxic behavior projected by managers?
It's a tough one. So here the employer is disregarding the cries of the employees. I think it's a difficult one because, I always say this relationship between an employer and an employee starts with the employee picking up their hand and saying, I want you to appoint me. I apply for the job. And once that is sealed in a contract, there will be those minimum things. The employer says, I will create an environment where you can deliver on your work. But then other aspects come in, the people aspects. You just find that two employees who are supposed to work together just cannot find each other. The most important thing is not to ignore these things as they arise. And they are there in a lot of organizations, to the extent that you find that even the employer cannot deal with these things because they need expertise. And that's where you start going for external expertise. This culture surveys that are done formally, and then there are recommendations. And then there are recommendations when you have a problem like that, is to follow those recommendations. That's
I have a bit to add on that. I think the employer as an organization, it's very tough when you're dealing with an employer that is unaware or is not addressing the issues. Stay touched on certain, remember, the management of the organization is ultimately in charge of the organization. So are the leaders of the organization really prepared to deal with these things, to the extent that they also are able to, or I'm going to use the word we, as leaders in an organization, to what extent are we aware of how we might be contributing to these things? So you spoke about executive coaching, which is one of the ways, and it's very good for leadership, because we also need to be aware of, whether intentionally or unintentionally so, how we project or how we deal with these things overall can come across to employees as they know there's a problem, but they're not doing anything about it. So we need to also be equipped, and leaders need to be equipped with the tools to make sure that it starts with them. It starts with the leaders, and it has to filter down. So it has to be the leaders that also are equipped to make sure that if they are part of the problem, they also have tools or are equipped with tools to resolve the problem. And I think it needs to start there. I think the employer needs to make sure that all the leadership in the organization are equipped enough to be sensitive to those things and to be aware of the areas where they might be playing a part, so that they can fix it. I hate to use the word fix it because it's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But we really need to start with fixing ourselves. So an organization has to force its leadership to undergo this type of training and awareness, because I feel it starts there. It really starts at the place where we as leaders need to make sure that we are the ones that create a safe environment, because a lot of the time people take the cue from us. So yeah, that's just the bit I want to add on that one.
Okay, I want to actually read Michelle's question, because it touches on aspects of what you're saying, Vuyo. Michelle says, I feel as though there's been an increase in general levels of anger, irritability, or reactivity since the start of the pandemic. She asks, is it true? Definitely within myself, but I'm curious to know whether it's true across the population more generally. How can we all work through this to become better members of society? So I think there's some self-reflection coming from Michelle, who says, I'm recognizing this behavior in myself, possibly maybe seeing it in others. How can we work through it?
Yeah, okay. Just go for it.
I think that is a very interesting question because there is a lot of disgruntled, members of society right now. There's a lot happening in the country. I always say South Africa is going through a lot. People are getting triggered quite a lot. And obviously, with the triggers will come the anger, the frustration. And it might not necessarily frustration towards each other, but because of what's happening in our external environment and also internal environment, maybe from a financial perspective, dealing with certain things in the home environment, we are going to start experiencing this culture of, anger and the likes, And I love the question because self-reflection is very, very important. How do you then knowing very well that some of the issues that we have might not be solved overnight, might not be something that you can solve as a person, but what act of kindness are you showing every single day to yourself, but also to others around you? It's very important for people to understand that you don't need to be hard on yourself. Some of the things that are happening, they're not happening to you only. They're happening to most people, if not all people. Like I said earlier on, we all have a mental health. So we're all getting affected in different ways, And as life progresses and we evolve over time and rediscover ourselves, we are going to tap into our mental states. And we just need to then show up as the best self that we can be, being self-aware, being reflective, and then also showing the same act of kindness that actually pulled you out of a state that you might have been in a couple of minutes ago, a couple of days ago, or within the pandemic period. If you can identify someone else who's struggling like you possibly struggled mentally, emotionally, feeling some sort of burden, show a smile, be kind. What are the acts of kindness are we actually putting out there and projecting? So the disgruntledness is there, but on a daily basis, what self-awareness work are you doing to then say to yourself, whilst there's so much happening around us, I can show a smile to someone else and be kind.
Wow.
Dr. Steph? Yes, so sorry, yeah.
I think self-awareness and because when you are self-aware, then you're able to self-correct, right? We all are human beings. Listen, we've all had bad days. Sometimes you don't intend to be irritable. You just come out of a meeting. It was a bad meeting and you're so irritable and you don't realize it. So one of the things that my team and I have in place is, and we talk about this with even when new people come in, we're all a team. None of us are perfect. Let's not let things build up, including myself as the leader of the team. If somebody offends you or speaks to you in a way that you don't like in the meeting or in the passage or at your desk, whatever it is, maybe give it a couple of hours or a day or whatever and go back to that person. And it's that open door policy. And we'll always say we need to keep each other honest. And the people that don't live up to what we've created must call us out, right? Everybody, including myself. Call me out, okay? If I've offended you, come to me, let's talk about it so that we can resolve it. If your colleague has offended you, go to your colleague. Or sometimes it's not easy to go to that colleague. Speak to somebody that is a mutual friend, right? We need to talk about those things. And sometimes it might take, I always say, sometimes if you're really in a heated moment, it might take you maybe an hour or two to get over yourself before you realize, what, Stay has a point. I could have handled this a lot better. So it goes back to that self-awareness, but creating that openness within teams to say, let's talk to each other and let's hold each other accountable. But let's have that open door that there is a place of safety where somebody at least can intervene if you feel that maybe you don't have the courage to go straight to the boss and say, I didn't like the way I know I did something wrong, but I don't like how you addressed it in the meeting. So I think those are the things that we can do as individuals. But in order to do that, we need to be able to receive and be open to receive the constructive criticism. And that goes with the self-awareness.
I suppose there's no running away from the fact that even these relationships that we have at work require work. They don't just self-resolve. They don't take care of themselves. You have to be invested in actively putting and feeding into those relationships and the kind of relationships that they are. Dr. Stan?
Yeah. Dr. Vu and Pride have already given the solutions that we would. But I wanted to just, in answering that question, whether the anger, I wanted to say, actually, it is global problem. It's a global problem. And you can understand if you look at how the pandemic just hit us and suddenly our lives changed dramatically. And it could then lead to, so remember, we are all now trying to adjust. You mentioned earlier on the hybrid way of working as one of the things we have to adjust to. But even when everybody thought it would be nice to work from home, you suddenly realize you don't have a proper desk. Some people don't have the proper space. Depending, you could be living in a one-room apartment and then you're expected to work at home. All of these things. And then because of, the biggest problem, now we are on visual platforms. If I decide at 5 o'clock but we need a meeting for this, we set it up immediately. There is no more that barrier of saying, no, I have to travel and all of that. And then suddenly people are having meeting beyond what would be regarded as normal. And the anger that she's talking about may be emanating from this change that we all had to experience, that we are all now trying to adjust to. And it just tells us one thing, that as employers, we need to give more attention to ensuring that we cope as employees with this sudden change.
Okay. I've got another question here. This is Desmond van der Westhuizen. Hi, Desmond. Desmond is saying, how do we manage employees who are absent for extended periods of time due to mental illness?
I would, so I don't know.
I think that's, again, understanding the issue, what is the illness, and how long does it take to recover. If it's depression, like Dr. Stan said earlier on, the 21 days will kick in, but also extension to that. So understanding what the illness is about and what support this person needs in order for them to actually fully recover. If it is a psychotic illness, it might take longer. So as a manager, understand what are the mental illnesses that are out there that can affect individuals. What are some of the triggers that can actually occur for this individual if the person needs to come back into the working space as well? What are some of the measures? And actually having those open conversations to say, maybe the job that you're doing was more high pressure. Instead of us putting you back full swing, perhaps, into this particular department again, these are some of the measures that we need to put in, because sometimes you need to give a person time to actually acclimatize to the condition that's actually occurred to them. And if they are on medication and are looking out for themselves and are trying to actually fully recover, you need to also then put them back in the working environment if it's safe. If they also feel it's safe and you feel that it's safe for them to be actually able to come back. But I think the most important thing is leaders need to understand mental illnesses so that you don't second guess and you don't go, it's depression. Depression takes a week, depression takes 3 days, So we second guessing, get over it. We become harsh in those environments, but you don't understand some of the things that actually are causing this person to be malfunctioning from a mental perspective. I always call it, whether it's depression, post-traumatic distress disorder, bipolar, what actually causes this person to get there.
I wonder if they're not workshops that the likes of medical aids are running or can be running that are targeted towards leaders in organizations more specifically, because if you don't understand a condition, then you won't have the appropriate responses when somebody does come in your door and say, well, I'm suffering from this kind of whether it's physical or even mental illness, especially mental illness.
Yeah, I actually wanted to add that when a mental health patient has been admitted, let's say for depression, anxiety, or even for psychotic disorders, they're looked after by a team of professionals. There's going to be the psychiatrist, a psychologist or counselor, there's an occupational therapist. When that person is ready to go to work, most healthcare professionals are actually more than willing to engage with the employer or the line manager. It's just a matter of communication. The occupational health therapist will tell you, these are, of course, without revealing confidential information, right? But this is how this person, these are the triggers. This is how this person needs to be supported in the workplace. And this is where they thrive or when they thrive. And these are the issues that then sort of are negatively impacting this person. So sometimes it means that we need to just go the extra mile.
Who must
if
facilitate that
the
conversation?
patient must facilitate that
Okay.
conversation. So because the treating professionals are always willing to do that because it will help, but of course it has to be with the permission of the patient or the employee.
Okay.
But those conversations, I have found, they help a lot because you are able then to understand, what do I do as this person's line manager to make sure that the environment is safe? And how do I ensure that I put them in an environment that makes them thrive? Or how do I look out for the warning signs and create an environment, again, open door policy, when they are not okay to come and say okay. And those are things that we probably most line managers don't even know that it does happen. Psychiatrists can write a report, but also the employees, I think, need to initiate that process. But that process is there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just to add to that fact that it's such a complex area where, I mean, if you have suffered from mental illness, even COVID, they've got this long
COVID
issue. Yeah. The issue of how you get, and I'm for lack of a better word, how you get rehabilitated back into work. And this is where occupational health practitioners come in very handy in assisting us in the workplace. Because the question, the way I heard it, it's almost like it's saying, if you happen to have any of these long mental illness problems or COVID, you are doomed. Because the employer environment is not so receptive of people who have had this. And this is really where those programs we are talking about at the beginning, they have to look at all of this. Because let us all accept the fact that in the workplace, we are expected to be productive, right? But now the employer, we are saying things are such that people drag themselves to work with mental illness and other sequelae of illnesses, and the employer should be part of the solution. They shouldn't take it as if it's not my problem, I just want you here to come and work. It's when the employer becomes part of the solution that we're really in a better place than what has been described.
I think I'm going to end it off with the questions, with this question here from Bonita, and maybe for you, Dr. Stan. Why do medical aids not pay social workers out of PMBs for mental health? Social workers are trained in therapy in the mental health space.
In fact, Dr. Buya is going to help me more.
Okay.
So we'll answer it, both of us.
Okay.
So the question is about social workers specifically.
Yes.
And I think we've got what we call allied health benefit, which is where we pay the non-medical is just basically primary healthcare, is your GP, and then you've got psychology, we've got dietitians, we've got social workers. You see, those we call allied health. So all of these are paid out of that benefit, and we're talking in very general terms, because there are other medical aids which will pay everything from one pool. And I don't know, that question is, why don't we pay social workers? And I don't know if you want to add anything, Dr. Voyo.
So we do. As Dr. Stan mentioned, the allied health benefit, but there's actually an additional social worker benefit. We've been criticized over the past year about how small the funds in that benefit are. And it's something that we need to look at. One of the things that, and Dr. Stan mentioned this before, is that when we start our product development process that will inform benefit design for the following year, we actually proactively engage professionals to say, tell us how this is working for you. What inputs do you have towards us improving our benefit offering? And this is just an area where the first thing is that we do pay for it, but we could improve. So it's something that we've been made aware of, and we are aware of, and we'll be working on it to improve at least the benefit offering that's already there, but it is there. And I fully agree that social workers are registered counselors. They are more than well equipped to deal with mental health issues. So we just need to make sure that I guess the offering that we create is improved, but it is there.
All right. It's been such an enlightening conversation, and unfortunately, as all good things, we're edging towards the end of this conversation. I certainly hope that you found it rather as beneficial as I have. Just a quick one in as far as the poll question that we asked you earlier. Does your employer offer the tools and support for physical and mental wellness? The results are quite interesting. So 56% of the respondents said yes, they do. 56. So
That's quite low.
look, it's a pass.
Yes.
It's a pass.
It is a pass.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a pass. 30% said no, they don't, and 12% said unsure. And I think that really points to the amount of work that even employers have to do in the workplace to inform their employees about some of the projects that they're running in the organization where it relates to mental wellness and well-being, overall well-being. I'm going to give you each a chance just to give concluding comments, remarks for this conversation before we wrap it up. I'll start with you, Pride, and we'll work our way here.
Thank you so much for this conversation. It was a powerful conversation because we need to start having the dialogue out there for people to understand themselves, to understand this mental health that everyone keeps on talking about. How does it affect you? Have you done a self audit, of self, and where are you sitting with that mental health perspective? And again, talking back to leaders, I think we need to have a vision. Leaders must be visionary about how they want to see human capital in their organizations thriving. So if you're a leader and you're somebody that's actually listened in on this conversation, what tools, what things are you doing to make sure that the vision that you have for your employees is actually a good one? And what safety nets are you putting in place to actually allow them to thrive in the mental health and wellness perspective? Because you need to have a well organization in order for your business to do well.
All right.
Well, let me there's this statement that a waking nation can only be a waking nation if it's healthy. So a healthy nation, it's a waking nation. And it is so important, while there is an expectation from the employer that the work should be done, which is production. On the other hand, the people, the human resource element needs also to be taken. So when you talk about creating an environment that makes it possible for you to execute your duties, we're talking about that balance between production and the concern for the well-being of the people. And I think that's very important considering what we discussed today.
So I'm going to end off with some of the things that we touched on, leaders in the organization. It's very important that leaders create a psychologically safe working environment. And it starts with the leaders. Be self-introspective. Realize how you are contributing to, I guess, the lack of psychological safety with the intention to move towards making sure this is a psychologically safe environment. It starts with us as leaders. I think with employees, be aware of your wellness. Ask for help when you are not well. Speak up. Find a friend. And you'd be amazed that when you open up, you find that there's more people going through the same thing than you realize, because we all put up this front that we're all okay. But sometimes we need to put the walls down, find somebody you trust and talk and ask for help.
Let me thank you all for your contributions to this conversation. Dr. Vuyo Kola is the Chief Health Officer at James. Dr. Stan Mulwabi, the Principal Officer at James, and Ms. Pride Mkwanazi is a mental health specialist. So our theme for the day, of course, was rediscovering you, health and wellness in a post-pandemic world. And what that suggests is that it really all begins with you. You cannot outsource the responsibility of your own physical and mental well-being to others. yes, there's a contribution that your employer, that the workplace has to play. There's a contribution that even your medical aids have to play. But ultimately, that first step begins with you. And we're all feeling the impact of the post-COVID world that we've been thrust in. And certainly you'll find you're not alone in those experiences. You're not alone in the impact that you are feeling as an individual. But take that first step to ask, am I okay? And if the answer to that is no, go further, do something about it, because ultimately only you can change the state of your affairs, because these are very, very personal affairs that we're talking about. It's been such a pleasure being in conversation with you. Again, I trust it's been a wonderful hour and a half of this session. A big thank you to the Mail and Guardian and GEMS who have partnered to bring you this conversation. That's where we'll leave it for today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Every minute, somewhere, someone is involved in the abuse and waste of healthcare services or is committing fraud against the medical aid sector. Common types of healthcare fraud, waste, and abuse include false statements that can result in unauthorized benefits or payment, extra costs incurred when healthcare services are overutilized or when claims for services are prepared and submitted incorrectly, or actions that are improper and inappropriate outside acceptable standards of professional conduct and result in unnecessary costs to a medical scheme. Medical aid fraud accounts for over 22 billion in lost revenue each year. GEMS has paid more than 200 billion in claims to over 40,000 healthcare providers since 2016. These losses drive up your premiums and make the system less efficient. You can avoid being a victim of healthcare fraud by keeping an eye out for fraud, waste, and abuse signs. Signs include decreasing benefit levels for services you haven't used, illegal agreements between members and providers to get cash back or other incentives in exchange for a claim, or paddling claims by always charging the same tariff combos. You should also keep your personal medical aid details personal. Always check your monthly statements to make sure that all claims are correct and that you receive the services that have been claimed for. Ensure that you and your family only use the healthcare benefits when it is completely necessary. If you see or suspect any suspicious fraud activity, report it to GEMS immediately. Call the anonymous 24-hour toll-free GEMS fraud line service on 0800 21 22 02 or email office@thehotline.co.za. You can also SMS short code 30916.
Plato said, "Who will guard the guardians? Who are our guardians? Do they care about us? Are they accountable for their actions, or are they above the law? Who elects these guardians? Us? Them? Someone else? And if they guard us, who will guard them? Who will guard the guardians?" The Mail and Guardian, if you really want to know.